today?
Good, John. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for asking. Even though it's been a crazy, quite a crazy day, but it's been good.
Good.
So, Ed, today we're going to be talking about the film Arcades and Love Songs, The Ballad of Walter Day. You directed it, and I just wanted to ask, what inspired you to bring this documentary to fruition?
Well, I had first produced The King of Kong, which was back in 2007, and had Walter in it as the video game referee. And in that film, he talked about having his heart broken back in the arcade era and starting to hear these love songs in his head after the breakup, and that he always wanted to give up being a referee and become a singer-songwriter with these songs. Well, the movie came out, it's this huge hit. So Walter becomes the King of Kong guy and sort of puts his music stuff on the side. And then along the way, Billy Mitchell got accused of cheating, who's also in the King of Kong. And Walter got pulled into a lawsuit for fraudulent scores that was really frivolous and quite predatory against Walter. So I actually got back involved in about 2019 as this controversy was going on. And then in July of 2022, I was actually on a call for the lawsuit, trying to just help with some strategy and make sure that Walter was okay. When this mobile game called Color Switch, who was also helping Walter and had become fans of his from King of Kong, said, "Hey, did you know that we're now paying for Walter to record his album finally?" And I just had this light bulb moment because Walter's always been, I've always loved Walter. I've always thought he's just a great person. And then to have this story of someone finally chasing his dream of being a singer-songwriter, it was almost too good to pass up. And so we started filming in August of 2022, filmed through the spring-ish of 2023, and then was, editing the film. So it was connected to my background with King of Kong. But most importantly, I thought it was a really just uplifting, really positive story. This is a guy that has always supported other people, always put other people in the spotlight. And it was his turn to take the spotlight. And so it was really a great opportunity. So we started filming and, I think captured a really compelling and really at this time in America, a very hopeful and lovable guy doing something that he's always wanted to do.
And that's amazing. And were there any challenges throughout filming? I know that documentaries, you are behind the person like basically every day, but were there any challenges throughout the filming process?
Yeah, every project has its own little twists and turns where you start to question whether you should be doing this film or not. Is it going to be good enough? Are you getting good enough material? I think um, the biggest moment of fear of whether I should be doing this, Walter had been building up to this live performance in his hometown in Fairfield, Iowa. And I had just never really done the calculus of, well, what if the show's terrible? What if it's not a good show? Because that's going to be a tough ending for a movie. It's going to be sad. And the first 15 or 20 minutes of that show, and we've got six cameras there, there's 100 people in the audience, and he's terrible. He's nervous. He can't sing. He's out of time. And I remember just this almost heart attack moment of, oh my God, we've been filming for 7 months with this guy. And the thing that we're building towards is going to be a disaster. I mean, it really felt like it was going to be bad. So that was, I think, the biggest moment of, oh no, what are we doing? We
Hmm.
spent all this time and money and energy to get here. But what was beautiful about that moment is the communities, both his local community in Iowa and also the gaming community that he had spent his life promoting and putting in the spotlight. They all turned and helped support him and gave him really the encouragement and the confidence to turn that show around. And about 20, 25 minutes into that show, you could see him gain his confidence, feel comfortable. He had never sung in public before that moment. And, something that vulnerable and that difficult, to see him get the support from the community, which we try to convey in the film, was really beautiful and poignant because he had spent his whole life giving these other people the opportunity to be in the spotlight. And then they realized that he needed them to help get his confidence and do better. So yeah, that 15 or 20 minutes beginning of that show, I probably was pale and sweating a little bit because I don't know how I would have made that film if that show hadn't have turned around.
That's amazing. Yeah, I remember at the when you're reaching to the concert that you see how nervous Walter is and how the sound engineer was like, you have to do this, you have to calm down. It was an amazing experience. I gotta say that seeing these type of documentaries, it's really great. It as well, you highlight as well how video games were before now that we have the internet and esports it's is exist. You know, what connection do you have with the video game scene, because you produced King
King
Kong
of Kong,
and
yeah.
King of Kong, and now you direct this one that is the story of like on one section of the film, he is the father of esports. So, what type of connection do you have with video games? Is something that when you were young, you were really connected, or is it something that has been a passion for you all along?
I think people forget if you didn't grow up in the 80s like I did, they forgot we all see video games now of this sort of, oh, it's a male dominated, it's sort of, nerdy kids sitting in their room. And, my kids play video games. It's a big part of the youth culture now in our country. But people forget that the arcade, which is what I grew up in, was a very communal place. It wasn't just for gamers. It was for everyone to go
Hmm.
and put a quarter in and see if they could best the score. It was a very communal place. And we've lost that a little bit with the home console market. But for me, my gaming was really baked in the arcade. I mean, we had a 7-Eleven down the street that moved out an entire refrigerator so they could put 6 games in. And
Oh
after
wow.
school, we'd get on our bike and go right to the 7-Eleven, get a Slurpee, and stand there all day and play video games. So that was really for me. I'm not a modern gamer. I play occasionally. I'll play with my kids sometimes, but for me, I was baked in the arcade era. So that's what really, especially when we were doing King of Kong, it was so nostalgic for me to go back to those games. Those games were in the 80s, and here we were in 2005 and 6 when we were filming King of Kong, and to see that these guys that were playing still had a passion for these games, still went to arcades. We went to the Fun Spot arcade in New Hampshire for that film, and you walked in, and it was like going back in time. I mean, it was really just like really for me going back in time. So my connection is through the arcade, and that's why I was, I wouldn't want to make a film about modern gaming because I don't know it. It's not my world. I know the arcade. I know what type of people play in the arcade. I also know the community that comes out of an arcade. Um, it's very much like going to a bowling alley or something. You're with other people and you're talking and being social almost more than you're gaming. And
Yeah.
so that's why this is for me, a soft spot in my heart for the arcade. And that's, what the focus of King of Kong was. And then, of course, this one, it goes a little further because to call Walter the father of esports back during the King of Kong wouldn't have meant anything. Esports was happening, but not on the level it's on now. But now, when you
Hmm.
say he's the father of esports, multi-billion-dollar industry, games that are worth more than all of Hollywood combined. I mean, Fortnite, just think of the massiveness of what that game is worth. And so now we can really put in context in this movie, when you say he's the father of esports, now it means something because we all know, even if you're not a gamer, how big the esports market is and really how important it is. Especially, I mean, my kids are 11 and 13. A big part of their social life is being on video games, playing with their friends.
Hmm.
I've heard my sons on Fortnite playing with kids in Israel. It's just this great connector now for these kids, and it's a big part of their social life. But for me, it started in the arcade.
I completely agree. Back in when I was still in high school, middle school, a group of friend of ours, a group of friends, we would always go to this arcade in the theater, and there
Yeah.
was this specific game that we would like all munch in that it was called it's still running in Japan only, but it's called Initial D. So it's racing game.
Yeah.
So we would
Yeah.
all like we were all together just hammering that machine like there's no tomorrow.
Yeah.
Um and how was it working with Walter? How was the day to day being with Walter in this documentary?
At first he was hesitant because the King of Kong, he had problems with the King of Kong. He didn't think it was
Okay.
fair to Billy Mitchell. He didn't think it was fair to how he ran the organization. So I had to convince him to do
Mhm.
this. And I think we came to realize that we're both very different people than we were back then. I'm obviously older, but I also have kids now. So, I just have probably a little more compassion built in than I
Okay.
did back then. And so at first, it was hesitant. Walter wasn't sure he wanted to do this. But as I continued to work with him, and really, I think the film gave him, he always wanted to record and perform these songs. When we started filming with him, he was already in the recording studio doing that. So he already had that done. But I think the fact that we were filming gave him the confidence and motivation to go through and do the live show. I think he may have done it eventually, but I think this film, and he even said to me, this it's kind of scary that you're filming this, but it's also motivating because I got to do it. I don't have a choice. You're filming, I have to go do this show. And so it really became a very, very close collaboration between the two of us. We're very close now. We talk almost every day. Of course, the movie's, in theaters now, so we have reason to talk. But he took a big leap of faith. He didn't know, what my motivations were and what I was after. But after we were filming for about 2 months, he called me and he said, this feels like it was meant to be. This feels like it was meant for you to film this. And I agree with that. I think that the reason I was, still in touch with him and helping with him getting through the lawsuit, it really did feel like it was meant to be. So it was bumpy at first, but it became a really nice collaboration.
And I wanted to ask, um, what would be the difference between being a producer for the previous film and now being the director? Is there any major difference between these two different jobs?
Yeah, in documentaries, they're very small groups of people. I mean, usually it's only two or three of us that are sort of flying around filming. So you sort of have to do the other jobs. But the biggest growth for me as a filmmaker wasn't as much as going out and shooting stuff. I've done that my whole life. I know how to make a shot list. I know how to interview people. I've been doing that a lot. But really, it came down to in the edit room in writing the
Okay.
story. Writing the story became the biggest part of my job. You have the director title, but really the writing, once we had shot everything, it was laying out the story and saying, okay, scene one is this, scene two is this, scene three is this, and really just being meticulous of, okay, why? Why are we telling this part of the story here? How do you connect? If you're going from here to here, how do you get to here? And that was really probably the biggest challenge for me was I'm the author. I'm the final
Hmm.
author of this. I worked with a great editor, Mike J. Nichols, who's just brilliant and really understood the material. But ultimately, I was the one who had to say, okay, we're going to go here first, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this. So I think the biggest difference was the writing. I was
Okay.
a part of the writing and the editing of King of Kong, but Seth Gordon, the director, that was his authorship. Whereas this one, it rests with me. And it took a little while. The editing for this film took almost 18 months for
Oh
us to
wow.
construct the film. Yeah, it's a very complicated story. There's a lot of history, there's a lot of exposition we had to get in. There's a lawsuit, there's a cheating scandal. There's all of these things that we had to kind of bring in. And so it was a very complex writing process. And I really grew as a writer. People don't think of documentaries as being written, but they are. It's just like a nonfiction book. You go out and get all these great quotes, but you still have to put the book together. And so the
Hmm.
writing, the writing side was really the biggest challenge for me was to grow as a writer, learn how to edit myself, learn how to cut things back, learn how to cut things out that you love. But yeah, I think the final having final authorship was the biggest leap for me.
And in previous interviews that I've had with people that do documentaries, they always tell me the same thing that you have told me, that the editing process is the difficult part. What was the actual, because I know that I think that the film lasts, I think it's 1 hour and 40 minutes, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken.
yeah,
What was the first rough cut? Was it more
Hmm.
than 3 hours? Because that's something that they normally
Yeah.
normally tell me, like, no, so we had first cut was like 4 hours, and then we had to shorten that, so it was harder. So what was like the actual first cut of the film?
Yeah, the film is at 93 minutes right now. And we had it wasn't huge. It was about 107 minutes was
Okay.
the first edit. And the editor and I loved it. We really liked it. We thought, it's a little long, but whatever. But you have to start. One of the hard things when you're editing is to get critical distance from the story. And the way you do that, the way we've done it, is we start doing test screenings. We send it to friends, we send it to other producers, other writers, other directors, and say, hey, can you watch this and give us your feedback? And what was nice was we immediately got back. You're nerding out too much on the lawsuit. We don't need to know as much about the lawsuit. You got to get to the concert faster. There's this great scene where Walter talks about how Taylor Swift became his muse.
Yeah.
And one of our feedbacks was, I want to get to Taylor Swift 10 minutes faster than I do. And so you have to go in front of that and say, okay, where can we cut stuff so that we get to that scene sooner? So we were at about 107 minutes. We got it down to 99 minutes. We felt pretty good. We sent it back out and we got more feedback. It's too slow at the beginning. We don't get going fast enough. And so it was nice because we took a break, had about 2 months where we didn't work on the film because we didn't know who we were going to, how we were going to distribute it and, just wanted to stop spending money. And that 2 months away allowed us then to go back in and say, oh, okay, that's just got to go. That's got to go. We were just making wholesale cuts. And we ended up taking 10 minutes out of the first 30 minutes of the film in that final pass. And that's a lot, that you're taking a third out of
Yeah.
the first 30 minutes. And it really helped because it just kept things moving. But no, we didn't end up with a 3 hour cut, but as 107 minutes about a guy wanting to be a singer songwriter is too long. Uh, um, but if there's any advice I can give to people that are making films and documentaries, show them to people along the way, people you trust, friends, family, not just filmmakers, not just storytellers, not just writers. You want to show it to regular audience members. I sent it to my brother, or the editor had a whole group of like 6 people. He's from Ohio, that he has these people that he just calls them and says, hey, I got a movie, can you watch it? And these are just people from Ohio, and the feedback you get from that, because you are making it for a general audience. You're not
Mm-hmm.
making it for your friends, you're not making it for other filmmakers. And that feedback is really helpful.
And Ed, I wanted to ask this, by any chance, after after all this goes through, when you finish promoting the film is in theaters and everything goes well and whatnot, is there any chance that your next film might be to go more in depth on the lawsuit?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I'm done. I'm done with this story. Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, that's not a film. That's a miniseries about the
Okay.
lawsuit. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but Billy just won his lawsuit in
Yes.
in Australia. So it's an ongoing saga. And for us, there was no interest on our side of doing King of Kong 2 because we've already
Okay.
made King of Kong, and we feel like it needs to just stand on its own and be its own thing. But for me, I'm ready for another subject matter. I've been working on this for
Okay.
3 years. I worked on King of Kong for 2 or 3 years. And so I'm sort of ready to move on. I will say, though, it is a fascinating story. I mean, what happened with Billy and his and the lawsuits and some really egregious defamation out there. There's a miniseries, but it's not for me to make.
Okay, okay. So nothing, Ed. Thank you very
Mhm.
much for giving us the time to talk about the film, and I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did. And I hope to see you in any other future endeavors that you have.
Great. Thank you for your time, John.
No, thank you. Bye bye.